Welcome back, everybody. It is 12:56 p.m. October 11th, 2017, and that is Eastern Time. All right, back to the weather updates. About time, right? First off, thank you guys so much for all the comments and the recipes for my throat. I can't even tell you how much it means to me that, basically total strangers are just going out of their way to try to help me, and it just means a lot. And I'm trying to thank every one of you down in the comments personally. But I figured I would just say it in a video too, just so you guys all know that I'm really appreciative of it, and it means a lot to me. And I'm sorry I haven't been as active lately. I'm trying. I'm just battling work and being sick. I got a great night of sleep last night, so I'm feeling a lot better, and we're ready to go. So let's get on with it. We have Ophelia right here. A clear eye wall has formed, even though it's still considered a 70-mile-an-hour storm. We're about 4 miles an hour away from it being a hurricane. Right now, its movement, our black triangle line that we talk about, which I have right here, is southeast. So that's the current direction. That's what this line is for with the black triangles. But as you can see, all the models are consistent that it's going to shoot up to the north and then more than likely be an issue for areas of Ireland. It may shift more. It was actually at an angle this way even this morning. So a lot can change, but the idea is that this thing is going to go north and get taken out by the jet stream and basically be a non-issue for the U.S. But we are going to watch it until we know that for sure. I mean, again, the direction right now as we speak is southeast. And if it kept in that direction, then we might be dealing with a westward warm water belt and it being recycled as a storm. I don't see that happening, but again, as long as this storm is here and not being pulled north, it is a possibility. So with that said, let's look at this system right here. Now, I've been watching this for days. We've been talking about it pretty much every update for the last week, and I was convinced many times that this thing was going to be an invest or a disturbance labeled on the chart, which it isn't right now. And I think, at least in my opinion, I don't know this for sure, but I think the reason that it hasn't been a disturbance yet is because of, believe it or not, the size of it. And even though it's a big, really formed cyclone deal, it's almost a perfect circle you can see in those last couple frames. We're just not getting that attachment of storms in the middle. We're getting a lot of those spotty white storms, a lot of water vapor in this. It's covering a lot of ground. It looks bigger than Texas, but again, it's just not, they're not clinging to each other enough to where it's turning into an issue or an invest or a disturbance. That may change. Now, this thing is big enough. I want to explain this to you guys. If it keeps this cyclone deal going on, if Cuba and South Florida don't break this apart and end this counterclockwise motion, this thing may end up in the Gulf. And we saw on the GFS and the CMC that both of those models had ideas of this thing going into the Gulf and then just basically stopping right here and then becoming a significant storm. And then we all saw how it just shot back from west to east back over Florida. Now, I don't know if that's going to be a legitimate thought anymore. It's basically based on the jet stream. I think the jet stream had a lot to do with it. It was a very flat wall that came down, and a wall was formed almost parallel with the east border of Mexico here, so it had nowhere else to go. So we saw it come in, it kind of stopped, it formed, and then it pushed out from west to east. So we do have to keep an eye on that, and the reason for that is something that may happen in the near future. Now, I have a warm water chart pulled up for you to help explain this. Now, picture the big cyclone right here, almost the size of Texas. Now, think about this for a second. These are surface temperature waters, and that's all you really need to focus on when it comes to fuel for hurricanes. It's, they don't really dig way down deep into the ocean and use that as power. It's usually the surface water because it's just closest access. And we clearly have burgundy colors. We have our reds, so this is very warm, very this is definitely hurricane formation water is what I'm trying to say. We had Ophelia form out here in these blues, so we know it's possible. But again, to get to my point here is that this cyclone is so big that if it does stay alive and stay in shape and gets into the Gulf, we're going to be seeing this water in the Caribbean on the surface getting pulled into the Gulf, making the average temperature a little warmer. So this thing may in fact cause its own formation. it could form either way. Even if it enters into the Gulf as is with these waters here, it's very possible for this thing to become an invest and then a depression, and then we're moving on to tropical storm and possibly a hurricane. That's why we watch these things. But again, just picture the size of it right here, and that thing moving into this area, and once that back end gets about right here, if it's still a formation, it's going to start pulling this water up into the Gulf. And these charts that come out daily, they may be every 8 hours, I'm not exactly sure, but you're going to start seeing these reds getting pulled in to the Gulf, and it won't be long-lived. It'll be a temporary thing, but it might just be the right timing for this thing to basically cause its own formation. It may pull this water in here and then use that water to form. So that's why we got to keep an eye on it. The Weather Channel is obviously looking at it because it just takes up such a huge area next to Florida. You can't look at the state of Florida without seeing this thing barreling towards it. It looks like a dangerous storm, but just as of right now, guys, it's not an invest, it's not a disturbance, it just is what it is. It's a bunch of spotty storms moving in a counterclockwise formation. It's going to affect South Florida one way or another. But, these are your typical, fast-moving. You get, the high wind gusts. You may get a lot of rain dumped very quickly, which is the last thing Florida needs. So regardless if this thing forms or not, it's going to cause issues. But what we want to see happen is we want to see a team effort here between Cuba and Florida, and we want to see them destroy this thing so then we don't have to worry about the Gulf for a while. But we all know how this season's been going, so there's no way I'm taking my eye off of it. A couple other areas to watch. This group right here is staying pretty intact. Now, it looked like it was breaking up when it was a little further or a little closer to the west coast of Africa, but it looks to be reforming. So we got to keep an eye on this area right here. Whenever you see these groupings of storms moving in formation, basically, and not shooting off in all different directions, you know you have some momentum going here. Now, it does look like it's going to clip the north end of South America here, and let's hope that happens. I mean, it might be some, bad weather for them, but it's a lot better than a hurricane forming. So that's where we're at right now with that. You can see a lot of vapor being a little bit shifted to the west. It's moving, or in an east direction rather, and it's coming off of this deal right here. So again, just all these different areas are showing a lot of activity. And then obviously we have Ophelia here. Clear-cut eye wall going on. That is 50 times the eye wall we got with Nate, and this thing isn't even a named hurricane yet. We're still a tropical storm according to the charts as of right now. Again, by the time I upload this video, this may very well be a hurricane. We're 4 miles an hour away, guys, so chances are this is going to be the record-breaking hurricane, 10th hurricane named in a row. I did post in a video that it broke the record, and that was actually a mistake by me. It didn't quite break it. It is a named system because it's Ophelia, but the record is actually the 10th hurricane in a row. So every single invest and tropical depression we've had, the last 10 have all become hurricanes, and that is and will more than likely be a new record. We're at 10. It was at 9. I believe that was in 2005, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe wrong. We'll look up on that. But again, this is Ophelia, and now that we're talking about her, let's go over the direction and the current paths of this thing for right now. And real quick, let's just look at the disturbance chart. Just to show you guys, there's no recognized disturbances as of right now. Again, this is that system that looks to be the size of Texas in the animation video. It doesn't show you really that cyclone formation part of it. It shows you just the inner vapor. Now, looking at this on this chart, it's a little more understandable why it's not being named a significant depression or an invest yet, because it just doesn't have that density inside the middle that it needs to do that. Plus, it's beginning to interact with land, so chances are, unless this thing stays in shape like we talked about and gets into the Gulf, I don't see it forming. But again, if it gets into the Gulf, guys, it may form. It may be the reason it forms by pulling this warm water into the Gulf. So again, we're going to watch that nonstop. But now for the direction of Ophelia, we are at 70 miles an hour, 992 pressure. Again, this may be different even by the time this video uploads. We're at 1:06 p.m. right now, so we could just do the simple math and see if that happens. But chances are, guys, this is going to be our 10th hurricane in a row. And again, as of right now, it's not a threat to the U.S. Those of you that have been following me, you know I talk about this line. I want you guys to know this. This is very important because some people get this confused with an actual spaghetti model, and that's not what this is. This is actually the current direction, and we were using this a lot when we were talking about Nate. This line was jumping around a lot with Nate. It was almost like every time they updated the spaghetti models, this line was actually shooting at Texas, and then the next model it was like 200 miles to the east, and then so on and so forth. So this does change, and it's very important to watch this line, because some people see this and they're like, oh my God, it's moving, it's going to go south back into, you know, West Africa, and that's not the case. This is just the current direction of where it's heading. But again, you see all these models grouped together. They're all very consistent and all very convinced that this thing is going to get picked up by the force of the jet stream. It's going to get pulled north. Now this morning it was a little bit more of a shallow angle up in this area, and now it even shows it missing Ireland. So that could be a good thing. We don't want it to come back in this direction at all, because then we're dealing with a situation where, based on the high pressures in the Bermuda Atlantic, it is possible this thing could come back down and find a path basically into the warm water belt. That's not what we want, and that's why this line here may be confusing to some people. They may associate this with this thing coming back down into the warm water belt and then becoming a recycled hurricane back towards the east coast. I don't see that happening, but of course, guys, it is possible. With this season going on, you can't rule anything out until it just doesn't exist anymore. And we know that because of storms like Jose and even Irma just broke all the rules that the initial forecast foresaw. So, you know, we got to keep an eye on this, and I guarantee this will become a hurricane. It's got a perfect eye wall. There's really no shear winds that are ripping it apart. In fact, the shear winds in this situation are helping this storm. We have shear winds to the south of it moving in this direction, and then we have another set of shear winds that are coming off the jet stream, actually, it looks like, or they could be aiding the jet stream in this movement. But again, we have opposite movement, and that's causing the counterclockwise rotation to stay very tight and hurricane type. So that's what I'm trying to get across with this. So that's what we have as far as Ophelia. Not so much a threat to the U.S. for those of you that have been waiting for this update. We're still in the same situation. It was basically forecasted from day one that this storm would not affect the U.S. But again, we are not going to be convinced of that until we see this thing disappear. All right, so I think that's where we're at right now. One more thing I want to point out, some areas to watch. We may have covered this, maybe not. Okay, so this grouping of storms here, just something to watch, and the keys to look for here are movement in formation. You can see this whole group here, which covers many hundreds, probably 1,300 miles of systems here, all moving in sync. And that's when you start seeing the storms attached to each other when there's no shear winds to rip them apart. You can maybe see some shear wind action going on right here with these strip clouds being pulled off, but I'm beginning to see some lines in here, these line clouds, and that means they're starting to connect together. So this is something to watch. Maybe it'll hit land here in South America and kind of end it before it starts, but this is what you look out for, guys. You look out for these big areas of storms moving together, and there's nothing really ripping it apart, at least at this time. We still have some systems coming off of South America that are getting pulled up by the force of this system here that, again, hasn't been named. We're going to watch this close. In fact, this is probably going to become more of a close watch than Ophelia, being that it's not really a threat to the U.S. right now. So that's where we're at right now, guys. I'm going to get you another update later on today. We're going to get back on our schedule here, and that will be that. All right, guys, thank you so much, and I'll talk to you down in the comments, and then if not, we'll talk to you in a couple hours. All right, talk to you soon. Bye-bye.